Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Hope everyone is good and doing well.
Afternoon.
Afternoon. Just waiting for a few people to get in. I don't think it's going to be a busy one today at all, um, but we stay consistent. We keep going. I know people got different commitments over the festive period. Okay, all right. So forgive me. I got two screens here. I'm just trying to make it all work. All right, I'll give it one more minute and we'll get into it. Okay. Just give me a sec. Let me get through these technical difficulties. Okay. All right. Thanks to everyone for joining the call. Um, Last one of the year. It's been a really interesting year, and the theme of this call is the gold rush in social housing. Just a discussion. We've got some points noted down that will help guide us through the next 45 minutes. And it's about social housing, social care, and just generally the support and accommodation industry, and just looking at things from my perspective. And I'd love to hear other people's perspectives as well on what they see and how we can avoid kind of just getting swept up in all the hype and create sustainable businesses that care for people in the industry. So, just a little bit of housekeeping. There should be a link in the description to our outline for today. Sorry, one second. Put that on silent. Sorry, can I confirm? Can everyone see my camera? Just feel free to put a hand up or a thumbs up. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I think I know what's happening here. There's a lot going on, so it's a bit slow. Okay. Yeah, so I'll put a link to the notes in the group for anyone to look at on that one. So yeah, the mission of the social housing group is just a community. It's just there to share information, share value. Um, we're not here to create any for-profit schemes or anything like that. It's literally just information. It's also important to note that we're not providing any financial or legal advice, and everyone should, do all their due diligence when moving forward with anything. So today's purpose is to look at how a gold rush mindset can overshadow genuine care within the sector. For me, I've been in the industry for over 6 years now, and initially it actually was a property strategy for me, but quickly I understood that I was going to get into the business of care, and made sure that the care came first, and I think that's shown through in everything that we've done. So I would say that I am experienced enough to talk on what's going on, and I've also come at this from the angle that a lot of people are now coming in, where they're almost looking at it like a property strategy without the experience, which can be very dangerous. I can't be a hypocrite, but it's important to separate the two. I've also picked out some real life articles as well that I think will kind of see us through well on this talk, because there's a few examples of people rushing in, scaling quick, making a lot of promises, and later on down the line we see them failing. All right, just give me a sec. So at any point, feel free to drop any messages in the comment box, or just feel free to put your hand up, come off the mic, and just talk. I definitely want to encourage conversation. Again, it's just about sharing what everyone knows, and for this to be a group discussion. I'm going to share my screen so we're all looking at the same thing at the moment. Cool. I think everyone can see that. So bear with me. Just to confirm before I move forward, can everyone see the meeting outline? Thank you. My screen's just moving a bit slow. I think it's the internet, so I just wanted to make sure everyone can see the same thing. Cool. All right, so market observations and emerging concerns. One of the things that I think is important for people to know is the term government backed gets thrown around so much. And the reality is, when we talk about government backed, it's only as good as the service. So, for an example of that would be, I work heavily with vulnerable adults. The local council pays me an enhanced housing benefit. However, if I do not deliver the service and I'm not able to pass their audits and their checks, they can claw back the money, and they can close down the placements. So when we're saying government backed, it's almost like saying a tenant's rent is backed by their employer. It's only as good as the tenant's ability to pay. Still, there are things in the middle of that. Um, a good employer does not guarantee the tenant will pay. Just like government backed does not mean for the investor, the provider will always pay. It's just the person that is the source of the funds. And there's very few cases in which the government are going to pay for a space, or the local council will pay for a space regardless of what happens. And there's a few big examples of that. There's no such thing as too big to fail within the space, but later on we'll see some of those examples. And inflation of prices as well. I think we need to also realize that unless it's particularly high need cases, such as like complex needs, children, or you're providing some sort of like living care, the rates that the government backs are actually quite reasonable. They're not excessive at all. But we've got a lot of different companies and organizations out there like offering like what great returns, and they look good, they're presented well, but it's very important to look out for things that they can't back. Basically, there's a lot of middlemen in the industry. There's a lot of providers that, when you look under the engine, it's actually not them delivering the service. It's just them delivering the investment. So real opportunities do exist. My organization actually presents them, but if it's too good to be true, it probably is. So unrealistic yields, minimal transparency. A key one I find is opportunities will pop up, the numbers will be there, but when you ask who is the provider, it's a secret. They're unable to say. And I think that's a huge red flag. There should be a maximum transparency with these things. So let's have a look at some of the key articles. So here was one from which hopefully I can get it up. And this is just from October 2024. Um, so it's gaining like national notoriety, with these claims of affordable housing and great returns, especially the investment blocks. But it's just not the case. I think one of the most recent ones that's popped up in our group as well was the Citygate situation, and they're not the only ones. There are a few of them, and I'll break down what I find uncomfortable about them. This one actually mentions Citygate, which one of the members of the group actually pointed out to be under investigation at the moment. And it also means that anyone that's invested in some of these schemes runs the risk of not getting their money back, essentially. Um, I can't really talk more on the Citygate situation other than I know it's gone left. People are not able to get their money at the moment and it's under investigation. Um, but I think the whole sentiment of the council has a duty and obligation to look after its constituents, and then people coming in and almost exploiting this part of the government to say, all right, we're gonna make a profit now, increasing rents, increasing and squeezing the margins where possible. It takes away from actually delivering the service properly. Can I just ask, is there anyone on this call at the moment that is actually a provider themselves? Or does anyone have houses that are let out under these kind of services? Just give me a sec. Let me get back on my notes. So yeah, the Yahoo article, or sorry, the previous one, talks about being careful and exercising caution, and then this one I found was interesting when I was just doing a little research on the situation. So this one actually highlights Citygate's accolades, and I think it's important to remember that not all media recognition means that it's a it's a long-term viable asset or investment. And there's a lot of celebrated providers that can face scrutiny. And I don't even say this as a to point out this particular organization, because I know firsthand that my organization at one time or another um, gets great reviews, highly regarded, recognized within the city. But I know behind the scenes what we go through on a day-to-day basis to keep things going, and it's not easy. And the reality is sometimes you're you're one significant enough situation with residents away from being in being in a difficult place. Unfortunately, I've had residents pass away in our properties, and the thing that makes a difference is policies and procedures. How has it been handled? What's the management of the situation like? Has it been handled professionally? Has everything been done that could be done to prevent the situation? And who's responsible for it? And I think that a lot of people new to the industry do well for a short amount of time until something significant comes up, and then they don't necessarily have the answers or the experience to deal with that. So, same company now that's under investigation was winning awards and highly celebrated just this year, as best alternative investment. So, to be honest, I actually hope that whatever it is can be solved. I hope they can work through it. I hope whoever's invested can get their money back, and I hope that if there is vulnerable people involved in the situation, that they're able to be housed or rehoused as quickly as possible. But this is just some of the reality of what we're looking at the moment. So links to these kind of things will be in the meeting notes for today. Anybody got any questions or any thoughts at this time? If not, we'll move on to the next section. Okay. So yeah, due diligence and transparency. Due diligence and transparency is important. It's not always easy. It's not always easy, especially when people present themselves very well. We're living in a time of social media marketing where anyone can get in front of a camera and be convincing. Sometimes it's also very hard to verify or do your due diligence because it sometimes feels like everybody is for something. Sometimes we measure it by likes and comments and, a few people having a good experience. Um, but I would say we need to start looking more at like management teams. We need to start looking at more like regulatory bodies that they were a part of. We need to start actually seeing and speaking to residents, things of that nature. So more than anything, this police investigation emphasizes the need to verify claims before committing funds to anything that is said to be guaranteed. An example of how I support our investors on the Gordon Brook side or the Crossroads side is I just let them know if anything was to go wrong with this particular investment. Not only do we offer personal guarantees, as in from the director, but we also guarantee that the rest of the portfolio will be used to honor any investments. So it's not a case of, well, if this goes bad, it's all over. We have a large portfolio of properties all producing an income that we can scrape from to ensure that anyone that works with us is looked after and handled correctly. Because more than anything, reputation and brand means everything can goes a long way, and we can't afford to damage our name or reputation or my personal name within this industry. And just another thing that I think is just a huge red flag is any time we're talking about social housing, are you actually seeing real care being delivered? A lot of times we'll see a building, we'll see nice advertising, nice marketing, we'll see the rooms, we'll see everything about it, except for someone saying, you know what, yeah, because of this service, I'm now better off. And I think that's part of the problem. We're missing the key element and accepting it as okay. At the end of the day, like, there is GDPR. Some people want their privacy and all that kind of stuff there, but there are ways of showing that you're actually delivering real care without, invading someone's privacy. And also, if you just ask, there are a lot of people that don't mind um, sharing their experience of the service. So when I see a lack of this, I think it's a huge red flag. Claiming to help tens and hundreds of people, so where are they? Ethical landlording. Property matters, but it's actually only half of the challenge. Staff need to be qualified, rates need to be fair, and there needs to be a care first perspective. So if you're a landlord or someone looking to get into the industry, even just as a property provider, I think there is an element of morals and ethics that needs to be put in place. If we know that the market rent for a property is 2,000 a month, is it reasonable to be charging 4,000 a month just because they're dealing with vulnerable children, and we believe that the rates for the children may be particularly high? Probably not. There needs to be some kind of middle ground, and I think that also needs to start on the landlord side, because you'll find that people in care just want to help, and sometimes if helping means that we need to secure a property, sometimes we can be desperate to move forward with the provision that it's almost as if, well, if we don't secure this property, then what are we going to do with the people that need help, at the expense of profit and at the expense of sustainability at times. And I know that there's a lot of people that are maybe new, that are eager to get into the industry as a provider with all the right intentions, and may not be as experienced in business. So they might agree to rates that initially seem good, but over time they realize actually this is not sustainable, and again causes them to fail. So I think landlords should take a level of responsibility in ensuring that the rates are fair. If the rate is set so high that even the landlord is thinking, "Wow, this is really good," something's probably wrong. It should be fair for everyone. So that's a big thing to look out for as well, because sometimes it's not actually the care provider, it's the landlord putting pressure on them. Like I personally have some landlords, not all, just very some, that every year they will increase the rate, and every time a news headline comes out about rate increases, or they hear about like the kind of rates that are involved in some of the care provisions that we have, the conversations become more difficult because they believe that we have it. And the reality is also these high rates are paid for a purpose. So there's something to consider in the industry, whether you are looking at it from the outside as someone that wants to be a provider or wants to be a landlord, or someone that is even thinking about referring people to these services. You might just want to help someone, and without doing the due diligence, can put them into a bad situation. So it's very important to check out a provider's competence and track record within the industry. Um, Exaggerated yields. Anything over 20% plus without the right structure is hard to maintain. At the end of the day, we live in a time where, like, really banks probably wouldn't go anywhere near 5%. Private money lending is probably around 12 to 15%. Most of the private lending that we receive is at about 15% return, sometimes 20% in depending on the situation and depending on the deal. So anything over 20% over a long period of time, if someone's promising 20% plus for years and years and years, guaranteed, no messing around, it's hard to keep up. It's very hard to keep up. And then finally, no real care structure. So the front person talking about these opportunities is often a middleman. They don't often know much about the delivery of the care. They can't guarantee it, they can't back it. If something happens to the care provider, they can't step in and they can't fill it. And I think that's a big thing here, because so much revolves around the delivery of their care provision, and that's what backs the guaranteed rent. In most cases, it's not even the people selling the investment that are actually receiving the money. It will be the care provider receiving the money and then passing it on to the middleman or investment organization that has helped to set the whole thing up. So that's just something to be careful of, because when things go bad, the accountability is quite poor. And the front man that was loud at the beginning will go quite quiet. So it's very important to be careful of these things. Just want to check everyone is getting value from this. So please just send me a little emoji or anything to just let me know uh, this information is relevant. Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, cool. All right, so next section, um, understanding the hype. I think some of it I've covered. I've probably covered a few of these points, but just want to speak about the mindset of it really, because like going back 6 years, for me, I was not aware necessarily of like the money that was being paid for like children or complex needs. Complex needs being like, imagine an adult with severe learning disabilities and is unable to live and look after themselves independently. So that would be like a CQC level, with children being Ofsted level. For those levels of care, you can imagine that the rate of pay should be high, because you are helping someone to live independently. You're helping someone to live a normal life that would be in a very difficult situation, if we can even call it that, without that person living for them. It also comes with a lot of responsibility. So I always say I know a situation where one of my peers in this field, a bit ahead of me, they have a children's home. One child was being paid, I think, about £12,000 a week. £12,000 a week for one child seems great. Seems like they hit the lotto. However, during that time, that child hospitalized, I think, two members of staff and another child. Over like a 12-month period, with one member of staff, like they were in a serious situation, because the child had mental health issues that meant that they formed very strong attachments. And if they felt that those attachments were at risk, they would lash out in a very violent way. And, if they felt challenged or threatened, they didn't have, it was fight every time, no flight. Which is why they was paying so much money, because they wanted to ideally keep that young person as close as possible to their family in the West Midlands area. But the only provisions that, after the one in the West Midlands, that could probably handle a young person like that were like out of area. We're talking either far down south or far up north. No one wanted to handle this young person because they were known for violent attacks, which is the reason why the money had to be paid. They would also damage the property a lot. I remember one time they caused over £5,000 worth of damage in a week, and that wouldn't be on. It was kind of regular for that to happen. It got to the point where this one young person was the only person in a 3-unit placement, and the organisation couldn't place another young person with them, whilst also needing 3 staff on at one time. So that's an extreme case, but the point is they're paying money for it, and if someone is able to handle that in a very nice, controlled way that is conducive to the development of that young person, then that's more of a testament to them. It doesn't mean that they should receive less money. It means that they are putting the money in the right way, they're training their staff right, and they're delivering a good service that now has that young person in a stable condition. But that doesn't mean at any point that that young person can't go left again. So when we hear these numbers, we don't necessarily hear too much of those kind of stories. And we're living in a time where everyone's just trying to make it, everyone's just trying to get ahead, everyone is being taxed heavily. Everyone's thinking of ways of leaving the UK to have a better life somewhere else. Everyone just wants to get ahead. So it's not hard to understand the hype. It's just it looks like an opportunity, um, but it's important to remember it's work. It's a hell of a lot of work. Like I myself personally have had in the 6 years, over three people lose life. Some by suicide, some by like overdoses and things like that. And it does take quite a strong mental toll um, on the management team. And at the level that I'm doing it, where I'm talking about vulnerable adults, the rates are nowhere near that. Nowhere, like less than a grand a month, at that particular time per bed space. So, you know, the mental toll, the the physical toll in terms of organizing repairs and all those kind of things there, staffing, retention of staff, all of these things, different things, what it actually takes to run an organization, you'll find that the margins, the potential profits can quickly be swallowed up. Not to say that there isn't money in it, but that money comes at a cost, and it's not a gold rush. It's not a passive business. It's not something that can be automated and forgotten about. Um, you know, I think it's probably most automated. It's probably most passive for landlords that buy a property and then pass it over to a provider for a decent rent, that they can negotiate and get the max out of, and then they can walk away and go and do other things and live their life. While someone like myself and other people that similar manage the day-to-day headache of not only running the property but also managing the tenants in it and keeping that property full. I think it's only really the landlord that enjoys a level of passive passive income in this particular industry. Realistic returns and profiteering. So yeah, as I said earlier, I think 10 to 15% returns or yields are more viable long term. 10 to 15%, 10 to 15% is something that we actually offer ourselves for landlords on properties that we sell on behalf of some of our clients, where we can put a 5-year agreement on the property for vulnerable adults, particularly in Birmingham. That would look like maybe a 5-bedroom HMO, and then we can make sure that the rental income and the value of the property equates to a 10 to 15% yield, depending on location and what it is. And that can often beat the price of the bricks and mortar. That's actually quite sustainable. But when we're talking about, like for example, some of these block deals where it'll be a refurbished block of flats or offices, and then they're selling like each unit for say 13 to 15 grand and guaranteeing like a fixed rent over like 20 years, it's very dangerous. There is no guarantee that anyone can last, or any provider can last and be sustainable for 20 years. At the end of the day, one bad significant event could see them lose their license or provision. It's more of a, what's the business continuity plan? What happens if they can't last the term of the contract? Is the agent, is the person handling the investment in a position to put someone else in place? Do they know how to handle that, or does the investment go bad? So yeah, if the value hinges on inflated rents or support that we can't confirm, things can collapse quite quickly. I have got actually a good example of one of these. That was a Lotus Sanctuary. Lotus Sanctuary is one that I actually followed quite early on, because I literally followed their progress from start to finish. They were Wolverhampton based. Let me get this one up. So again, they were actually quite similar to us, but they scaled very quickly. Where they were doing vulnerable people, Wolverhampton based. They got to a point of capital and reserves of 1.5 million and 88 employees. It's a bit hazy as to what went wrong with this one, but they had cash flow issues. So straight away, I can definitely understand how you can have assets, you can have a very high turnover in the millions and struggle from cash flow issues because on a day-to-day basis, it's like they say, turnover is vanity, profit is sanity, and the profit margins in this business, especially when we're talking about the exempt housing sector, honestly, we're talking like 10% or less. It's not 20% or more or anything like that. It's 10% or less. And if you're really trying to do it properly, if you're really trying to give me a sec off this one. If people are really trying to do it properly, where they are managing the properties, sending people out. If they don't have the right tenant type, if they have the kind of tenant type that is going to destroy the property on a regular basis, and this can come when people are trying to fill beds very quickly, they tend to attract the wrong type of people, and that attracts also a lot of maintenance, a lot of maintenance, and then this is now where the cost of maintenance come in. I've got someone there with their hands up. Feel free to ask a question. Sorry, did you want to ask a question? All right, I'll continue, but feel free to jump in at any time. Yeah. So yeah, Lotus Sanctuary is a good example of just being careful. Just being careful because even big organizations can fail. And like I said, big turnover, lots of bed spaces, big organization doesn't necessarily mean safety. If the tenant type isn't right, if the management isn't right, if you don't pass the audits, if you don't meet the requirements, funding can 100% be pulled. Right, let me go on to the next section. Does anybody have any questions on anything I've touched on so far?
Yeah, I've got a question, if
Yeah,
you
yeah.
don't mind. What would be the maximum time you'd potentially have an agreement with a landlord with?
So at the moment, we do 5 years. I really want to push to 7. And the logic behind that is more so based on where do I feel like we are as an organization? Do I feel like we'll be here in 7 years? Do I feel comfortable offering a landlord a 7-year agreement? I have no doubt that we're here for the long term and we're setting it up to work without us. And we have great business continuity plans. Originally, we started on 3 years. Then we started to learn the game a little bit more, got more confident. Now we offer 5 years. And we're past 5 years with most of our landlords now anyway. So I don't see why 7 years and eventually 10 years wouldn't be reasonable. Um, is there any reason why you asked that?
No, so as you was mentioning, so you said obviously a long lease on properties over 20 years and
Yeah.
apartments. So that's where I got that.
Okay.
The,
Okay.
that from. Right. Well, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So when I talk about 20 years, you'll find that that's like for the larger organizations like the ones that are like well-established charities. They can offer those ones. And when it gets to about 7 to 10 years, it actually starts. It becomes a bit more commercial than, let's say, 3 to 5. 3 to 5,
Mhm.
3 to 5 is respectable. Three, still a little bit light. But once you start getting past the 5 mark to the 7, that's when like mortgage companies will actually pay attention really, and it will really start changing the value of the property. Beyond just asking for a higher value for the property, 7 plus. mortgage companies are like, all right, we respect what's going on, and if it's a viable company, that property is now worth more because of the contract on it. But yeah,
Okay.
20 years, we're talking like, say, St. Basil's and YMCA, those kind of organizations.
All right. Thank you.
No problem. Anybody else got any questions? Okay, cool. Let's go to the next section. So, spotlight on children's social care placements. Um, I think that this has really been where most of the gold rushes come from. Um, there was. It's not a new thing. The industry's been there forever and a day, but I feel like it's been the property industry that's really pushed this. There's been a lot of the gurus, a lot of the you know those out there that are looking at different property strategies that are pushing people to get into this industry. I think the issue really starts when property professionals start trying to become care professionals, um, or start wanting to collaborate with care professionals to um, to extract profits. Because at the end of the day, like I said, the care professionals are paid that money for a service. So if they have to start giving away a big chunk of income to an outside organization, they're left with less money to actually deliver the service, which can lead to substandard services. Um, Quality and safeguarding should never be an afterthought. Yeah, feel free to speak.
Hello, Michael. Thank you so much for your time and your energy in this. Um, I've got a quick question in regards to someone's wanting to start in social housing. What would you suggest would be the best thing to do? Would you say it is sort of looking into the area and then sort of thinking what's needed, as in, adult, or is it children, or would it just depend on your like what you specialize in? Like, what would you say would be the main thing to look out for?
What do you currently do? What would you say? Where's your focus, or what do you want to help with?
So at the moment, I'm currently a deal sourcer, but I am looking to do children's,
Hmm.
so like the 16 to 18-year olds. But I live in like Staffordshire,
Hmm.
so I'm just like thinking, do I go with what the area needs, or do I just branch out and go elsewhere and go after that? Or do I go after like what I'm looking for essentially? Like, I'm just trying to decide.
So one of the first steps would be to reach out to the local commissioners, basically heads of service, the people that are in charge of the well-being of either children or adults. There'll be like different people for each of these things. The best thing you can do is reach out to them and just ask them. I'm not saying it's easy to get in contact with them, but the details and the information to reach out to them is actually public for the different councils.
Okay.
So you just reach out to them and ask them, like, what is there a need for within this council? Some will say, we need children with learning difficulties. Some might say we need adults with dementia. So if you want to be led by actual real data, by speaking to these people that have the information there, really that should lead how you move forward. And that's important because you'll get support from them as well. If you involve them from the start, you'll get the support from them because you've done what they've asked you for. And so when it comes to getting referrals and things like that, these people can basically co-sign you. Um, However, there's always a need for, say, a children's service. There's always going to be a need for elderly residential care. So it's just a bit of a chicken and an egg situation. If you really want to be prepared, speak to the people that are going to sign you off. Speak to the people that are actually going to provide you with the referrals. When it comes to adult safeguarding, as in just vulnerable adults, vulnerable people being, I would say, low needs, and maybe some drugs and alcohol, maybe stress, depression, anxiety, but essentially they can move back into independence, they can get a job, they can sort themselves out. If we're just talking about vulnerable adults in that way, that's probably the lowest hanging fruit within any council. It's the lowest paid, but it will allow you to build an understanding of how to work with the council. Not all council pay a rate that would make it affordable. Birmingham has been heavily saturated to the point where they've almost closed it down now because they were paying more. But I know Coventry will also allow the service. I know Nottingham allows a service. Bradford allows a service. And I always encourage people, if you just literally type in support exempt accommodation and then an area, you'll quickly find whether or not they deliver it in there. And then you can start speaking to people within the council or other providers within the area to learn their experience. So rather than jumping in and doing it in the way that you would like to, I would say do the groundwork and find out, what's the need, either by speaking to commissioners or other people in the area delivering the service.
Okay, perfect. That's great. Thank you.
No problem. So yeah, I've spoken on how children's care placement costs are running quite high, and costs have surged. Costs have surged because there aren't enough sufficient provisions. So even though it seems like everyone in this space is trying to set up a home, the reality there's a lot of homes also being shut down as well. And the other issue is the people from outside of the industry or don't have an understanding of the industry, just have the money, are paying consultants, setting up homes. And then when it comes times to fill the homes, they're actually stuck because they don't have the relationships. At the end of the day, you still have to know the people, and the people that place young people have to know you. And if you're coming at this from a financial standpoint where it's the gold rush, I've got a house, I've got the consultant, we've got the planning, and we've submitted our documents, and now we've got Ofsted approval. It's okay to tick all those boxes, but when it actually comes to making a viable business, it really is based on relationships and care, which means that when placement teams have high risk youth or high risk cases that they need to place, there's so few places that they can send these young people to that they end up almost having to pay over the odds just to get them a home. And it's a crazy situation in that way. The average bed space for a young person is actually supposed to be around 5.5 grand a week. 5.5 grand a week, and that's like 24-hour care, and the organization's supposed to really be their corporate guardian. And that's one of the things that's pushed that up now, is people being aware of the numbers, people being aware of their properties being used for these services, and then the landlord starts saying, well, if you're going to use it for 3 young people, and if you're getting say 5-6 grand a week for each one, I don't think it's unreasonable for you to pay me 4-5 grand for rent in an area that really the rent policy should be about 2 grand. And people without the experience of business come and say, all right, you know what, I'll pay you the 4-5 grand because I've still got the other 2 rooms. One room will be to pay the bills and the staff, and the other room will be to be my profit, until they get that one young person that prevents the other 2 rooms from being able to be filled. So definitely something to look out for. Just conscious of the time. So I'd encourage people to click on these links in their own time just to get a better idea of what's going on. But it's even been noted that the councils around the country are overspending. And I am seeing in a few different places, especially in Wales, that they're thinking about putting caps on it, because I guess it's one of those ones where they know that if they cap it, eventually people are going to have to just work with it. Right now, I feel like the councils are almost being held for ransom a little bit. But the attitude is starting to change and say, well, if you want a viable business, you've already invested so much into it. If I cap it, you're not going to start turning away the young people. You're just going to have to work with them and work at a lower margin. Just one sec. Thank you. Yeah, you just have to work at a lower margin. And then finally, this was one that a BBC article picked up on systematic pressures, including staff shortages and opportunistic investors. So again, none of this is anything brand new. It's well known, it's well publicized, and we know once things start hitting, platforms such as BBC in this way, using these buzzwords, uh, Parliament, and people at high positions, they have to pay attention. They have to start putting changes in place. Councils can't continue to operate knowing that this is the public perception of the industry. It's not good. Mixed with a lot of poor provisions, bringing a lot of bad press onto it. So in order for them to maintain quality and safeguarding, like I said, potential rate caps, increased regulation, which is already coming, to weed out those that are purely profit driven. And I've even seen that inspectors, especially for Ofsted, are now starting to look at the management team and the director team and saying, well, why are you interested in setting up a children's home when you come from an IT background? And they're actually asking them to either put a better management team in place, or they're not passing them anymore. All right, let me just skip through this as quickly as possible. So collaborations and partnerships. Collaboration and partnerships are something that I always push for, and I'm definitely open to working with people and sharing knowledge as much as possible. Of the SHG group. If you're working with local authorities and housing associations and anyone, check, are they a preferred provider? Really, if they've done the work, they should be known to the council, whoever you're working with. And even if you are a provider yourself, it should always be your goal to get to the point of preferred provider status. For my organization, it probably took me of like 2 years of conscious effort to get to the point where we are noted on the Birmingham City Council website and have direct communication where they refer people to us. There'll be pathways for things like that. One of the pathways that we chose to help us on that journey, other than our own branding and marketing, was BVSC. So BVSC is definitely something that I would say any providers should be registered with. And if you are a landlord or someone looking to work with a provider, these kind of voluntary organizations show that the person's committed to delivering a higher standard. And as a landlord, if you're working with landlords as well, personally, I would say if you are working with a landlord that's not interested in repairing or meeting their obligations in regards to the lease, or if they're more interested in charging you very high rents and ensuring that those rents go up every single year, it's probably not where you need to be. It's okay to walk away from those deals. And I would say, as a landlord, if you've got people that don't seem to care about a high rent, I'd probably also work away from them, because it's supposed to be about sustainability. Stay connected to different mental health services, charities, and educational programs within the communities that you want to operate in. Even as an investor, even as a landlord, keep your ear to the ground, because it's really a group effort. It's collaboration. So I feel like anyone that's getting involved, even if you do want to play the middleman, do as much as you can to understand what's going on and understand what good looks like and what bad looks like, so you can see the signs early. Just remember, positive press and awards and all these kind of things. They're great. They're great to win, but they don't mean that this company is going to last forever. So you always have to stay vigilant and do your due diligence. Really, every 6 to 12 months, you should be having a conversation with the providers or anyone that you're working with to make sure that things are still, where they're supposed to be. And for 2025, for me, I can see tighter oversight coming in, probably even some prosecution for people that are performing very badly and putting young people's or vulnerable people's lives at risk. I think that's on the horizon. Right now, we're just seeing people's having their licenses and provisions revoked and stopped. But I think we're probably going to start seeing some prosecution, as we have with the earlier example. But I think that genuine providers will benefit really as these organizations get filtered out, and the cream will rise to the top. I like to think that Crossroads Housing and Support is always an example of what good support looks like. Our doors are open. If anybody ever wants to understand a bit more about what we do, whether it's to work with us or work with anyone else, it's what we do. The only thing that we ask is that if we ever, or if I, or if SHG ever gives you any kind of information that you can use, just let others know. Just help us to grow the group and help us to create a safe space that people can continue to build and grow from. All right, so just to close off, I won't necessarily go through these because I know we've gone over, but it's just in your own time. Questions to ask yourself. Questions to ask yourself around any kind of investment opportunities, or questions that you can ask before you work with anyone or do any work within the industry to help to make sure that everything's aligned and where it should be. And just one of the key takeaways: the real social housing isn't just about the property. It's important to remember the care aspect of it, and just to know, even if we are just talking about the business and profit standpoint, if the care fails, so does the business, and there's nothing in it for anyone. And then now we're just going to be left with properties that are not really usable for anything else because they're often made or tailored for purpose. So it's all good asking for the high rents for a children's home and making sure it's got all the compliance in place. But if it doesn't work as a children's home, 9 times out of 10, it's probably just going to be another residential property that's, now underpriced for the amount of work that's gone into it. So everyone should be thinking long term. All right. Thanks everyone for jumping on another call. Really appreciate the questions. I've included my social media links in here. I've also included a link to the social media group, social housing group. So feel free to share if you think this is a valuable space. And wishing everyone a great 2025. Thanks all.